My name's Nathan, I'm 28, and if you'd asked me a year ago, I would have told you my sister Jenna and I were close. Not best friend close. But I always thought there was a quiet understanding between us. Growing up in a house where our parents could barely pretend to like each other, we learned to lean on each other in the background, where it was safer. She was 2 years younger, more outgoing, always the one with a crowd around her. I was the quieter one, the one who fixed the Wi-Fi, picked her up when her car broke down, or helped her move into yet another overpriced apartment she couldn't quite afford. I never expected a thank you, never asked for one. But I also never expected this. The wedding had been in the works for over a year. Jenna and Tyler, her now husband, were one of those couples who insisted on making everything into a photo op, matching flannel engagement photos, champagne-themed proposal parties, even a live-streamed "Will you be my bridesmaid?" brunch. I watched it all unfold from a distance, invited to participate but never quite included, if that makes sense. I was always the one behind the camera, holding bags, fixing the lighting. And I didn't mind, not really. I just kept telling myself, it's her big moment. Let her shine. Still, when she asked me to contribute financially to the wedding, I was surprised. Not because she asked. I had a decent job in tech and no one else in the family was exactly swimming in money, but because of how casual she made it sound. Like it was obvious. Like of course I would. She called me one evening last spring and said, "Nate, I know it's a lot, but if there's any way you could help cover the venue deposit, it would mean so much. It's just until Tyler's bonus clears. Then we're all good." I agreed. I wired $10,000 2 days later. No big speech. No contract. No drama. Just a note that said, "Congrats. You deserve the best." That money was never brought up again. Not when the save the dates went out. Not when I wasn't invited to the tux fitting. Not when I was the only sibling not in the wedding party. I told myself maybe I misunderstood. Maybe they were keeping it small, but then I saw photos on Instagram, 10 groomsmen, 8 bridesmaids, even Jenna's college roommate's fiancé had a role. I felt the sting, sure, but I didn't say anything. My mom would have just called me dramatic. My dad? He would have shrugged and changed the subject. As the wedding weekend approached, I kept my head down. I booked my flight, took the time off work, even upgraded my hotel suite just so I wouldn't have to rely on anyone else for anything. The night before the ceremony, I offered to help with setup. Jenna said, "That's sweet, but we've got a planner." Tyler chimed in with a two-chipper, "We'll see you tomorrow, big guy." I smiled, nodded, left early. Alone. I showed up to the venue the next afternoon, a glossy, over-decorated estate in the hills that looked like it was plucked straight from a wedding influencer's Pinterest board. I walked in early, dressed to the nines in a charcoal suit, carrying a small black envelope with the actual wedding gift inside, a bank-certified check for $10,000. I figured, if they never mentioned the deposit again, I'd just make it the gift. Clean slate. The reception hall was stunning, white orchids, crystal glassware, the kind of soft lighting that makes everyone look 10 years younger. I looked around for my place card. At first, I thought maybe I was just missing it. I walked up and down the long, rectangular tables twice. My cousin Becky had a seat. So did her boyfriend of 3 months. Even Jenna's high school debate partner had a place card. But mine? Nothing. Not even a blank one. I finally asked a staff member, a kind older woman who looked like she'd seen her fair share of wedding meltdowns. She double-checked the chart and said, "I don't see you listed. Were you maybe invited just for the ceremony?" I blinked. I flew in from 2 states away. That's when I noticed Tyler's mother, Sandra, standing nearby. She'd always had this smug, performative warmth to her, like everything out of her mouth was meant to be quoted in a family newsletter. She smiled, almost pityingly, and said, "Oh, Nathan, we assumed you'd be too busy helping out or something. Jenna said you're always more comfortable staying in the background. We didn't want to make you feel out of place." I looked around again. Distant cousins, friends of friends, Jenna's yoga instructor, all seated, all smiling. My ears started ringing. I was too stunned to even speak. And then Sandra added, with that same soft condescension, "But there's always standing room at the bar, dear. That's where the fun is, anyway." Something in me snapped. I walked over to the gift table, this mountain of boxes and glittery bags and oversized envelopes, and found the one I'd brought. Sleek, matte black. Simple. I picked it up, held it in my hand for a second, and then turned to face the room. I wasn't loud. I didn't shout. I just said, in a clear, steady voice, "Didn't realize a $10,000 check only buys me humiliation. Good thing refunds exist." You could have heard a pin drop. Glasses froze midair. A bridesmaid's mouth hung open like she forgot to finish her mimosa. I turned and walked out, envelope still in hand. And just as I reached the main doors, I heard rapid footsteps behind me, heels clacking against polished marble, and then, Nathan, wait. It was Jenna, in her dress, out of breath, her veil slightly askew. She grabbed my arm with a desperation I hadn't seen since we were kids. Her perfectly done-up face, flushed from running, suddenly looked less like the Pinterest bride and more like the girl who used to sneak Pop-Tarts into my backpack because I skipped breakfast again. But whatever guilt that stirred up, it didn't last long. Nathan, she said, breathless, please, can we talk about this? I raised an eyebrow. No? On your wedding day? Weren't you busy not noticing I didn't have a seat? She flinched, but recovered fast. It was a mix-up. I didn't know. The planner must have. Cut the planner excuse. Your fiancé's mom told me you said I'd be more comfortable in the background. I held the envelope loosely between two fingers. Did you tell her that? Honestly, Jenna blinked. And then, in the smallest voice, she said, I didn't think you'd mind. And there it was. That casual cruelty disguised as thoughtlessness. Like it was my fault for not wanting to be the center of attention, so that gave them permission to erase me altogether. I didn't think you'd mind. That one sentence rattled around in my brain like a ricochet. I stepped back. You didn't think I'd mind being treated like a cater waiter at your wedding? After funding a huge chunk of it. Her eyes widened. Wait, what do you mean? I paused. The deposit, Jenna. The one you asked for until Tyler's bonus cleared? You never paid me back. I assumed we were folding that into the wedding gift. That's why I brought this. I lifted the envelope slightly. But clearly I was mistaken. She opened her mouth, but I cut her off. And before you try to say you forgot, I didn't need a seat at the head table. I didn't need a speech or a spotlight. I just wanted a chair. Literally 1 square foot of space to exist like a human being. And apparently, that was too much. I didn't mean to hurt you, she said, softly. And for a second, her voice cracked. Yeah, I said. But you didn't care enough not to. Behind her, the music from the reception drifted faintly out. Laughter, clinking glasses, someone calling out for a group photo. All without me. All the while, the family I'd quietly supported for years treated my presence as optional. She looked down, biting her lip. If you just come back in, I'll fix it. I'll make them bring out another chair. A chair isn't the problem, Jenna, I said. The problem is I never needed a spotlight, but I sure as hell expected a little respect. And after 28 years, I finally figured out that being the dependable one doesn't mean people will value you. It just means they'll use you until you're empty. She looked like she was going to cry, but I couldn't do it anymore. I didn't want the tears. I didn't want the last-minute guilt. I turned around and walked toward the valet. I could hear her call after me, Nate, please. But I didn't stop. Not even when the valet pulled up my rental and asked, heading out already, sir? Yeah, I said, sliding the envelope into my jacket. Turns out I wasn't invited. I drove off, phone buzzing in my pocket, missed calls from my mom, a text from my cousin Emily that just said, what happened? And I ignored every single one. I didn't even check my family group chat. I went back to my hotel, ordered room service, poured a drink, and sat in silence. That night, around 11:45 p.m., I finally opened my texts. One from Jenna. One line. Please don't tell mom and dad about the money. Tyler doesn't know you paid the deposit. I stared at it. No apology. No ownership. Just fear of the fallout. And in that moment, something inside me settled. The silence I'd endured, the, oh, Nate won't mind, the constant erasure, I realized it wasn't going to stop. Not unless I made it stop. So the next morning, I didn't go to the family brunch. I didn't return Jenna's message. I didn't respond to my parents' calls, either. Instead, I drove to the airport, caught an earlier flight, and spent the next week reviewing every wire transfer, every automatic payment, every shared account I'd ever set up to help my family. Utility bills. Insurance policies. Even the emergency credit card tied to my name that no one really used. I made a spreadsheet. I totaled everything. And I made a decision. Because I wasn't going to just quietly walk away this time. I spent the entire flight home in a haze. Not angry. Not even hurt, really. Just clear. For the first time in years, I wasn't second-guessing myself. I wasn't wondering if maybe I was being too sensitive or too proud or too dramatic. I had receipts, literal and emotional. And I was done pretending my generosity was some endless well they could drink from without even a word of thanks. The spreadsheet I'd started in my hotel room became something of a personal audit. I opened every bank app, every email with an invoice, every shared bill from the last 5 years. I hadn't realized just how much I'd quietly shouldered over time. It started small, covering our dad's car insurance when he got laid off. For a few months, it had been almost 4 years, paying off Jenna's last semester of college because my parents said they were tapped out. Floating the balance on a family group vacation they swore they'd all Venmo me for. They never did. I always told myself it didn't matter, that they needed me, that helping out was what family did. But helping out and being taken for granted are two different things. And somehow, over time, my entire family had decided I was just the quiet ATM that could plug guilt into and cash out from. The turning point was when I found a charge from 2 weeks ago. $194.85 for a catered bridal luncheon from some trendy bistro near Jenna's apartment. I hadn't been told about it. I hadn't been invited. But I had paid for it through the shared card my mom still had access to. The same card that had covered everything from emergency dentist visits to Uber rides when her battery died again. I didn't even get mad. I just smiled. And then I got to work. The next few days were quiet, but methodical. I revoked every secondary user on my credit cards. I froze the emergency account. I called the bank and removed myself as a guarantor on our dad's car loan. I changed the login info for the utility portals. Electricity, water, gas, cell phone family plan. Everything. I waited until 7 a.m. Monday morning, just when I knew my mom would be waking up and turning on her Keurig. Then I scheduled every service to shut off that afternoon. I wanted it to be loud. Around 2:30 p.m., my phone buzzed with a text from my dad. Internet down. Did you forget to pay again? I didn't answer. By 3 o'clock, my mom called. Twice. Left a voicemail. Nate, the power just went out. And the water. Can you check the account? I think something weird is going on. I played the voicemail on speaker while eating lunch. Didn't respond. At 3:42 p.m., Jenna texted, "What is going on? Why is mom freaking out?" I didn't reply. At 4:16 p.m., another from Jenna. "Did you cancel the bills? Are you serious right now?" That one made me laugh. Now it was serious. Not when I was erased at her wedding. Not when her husband's mom mocked me to my face. But now, when the Wi-Fi was down. By 6 p.m., the group chat lit up. First from my mom. "Nathan, we need to talk. This is extremely immature." Then my dad. "You're better than this. You're just hurting everyone." Then Jenna again. "I told you I didn't mean to leave you out. This is too far." That was the moment I finally responded. I copied the balance from my spreadsheet, $63,842, and dropped it in the chat with one line. "That's what I've paid for this family in the last 5 years. Itemized receipts available upon request." Then I followed up with, "You don't get to ignore someone until they're useful again. That card's maxed out. Forever." Silence. For 3 hours. Then, finally, Jenna, "Okay. I didn't realize it was that much. I'm sorry. Can we at least talk?" I almost said yes. Almost. But then I remembered the way her new mother-in-law had looked at me. The smugness. The comfort with which she dismissed me as if my existence was a footnote. And I remembered how Jenna didn't flinch, didn't correct her, didn't offer me a seat. So instead, I replied, "I think we've talked enough. I'll forward my Venmo in case you ever want to start paying back your tab. Until then, best of luck with married life." Then I muted the group chat, blocked Jenna, turned my phone face down. And for the first time in my life, I sat back and enjoyed the silence, not as something I had to survive, but something I finally chose. It didn't take a week for the fallout to begin. It took 3 days. 3 days before the cracks in my family's perfect little facade started showing, and they came running not out of love, not out of regret, but because the silence wasn't convenient anymore. Day 1 had ended with muting the group chat and blocking Jenna. It was cathartic, clean, and, if I'm being honest, a little terrifying. Cutting off people you've been silently supporting for years feels like slicing off pieces of your identity. But it also felt like breathing fresh air for the first time in years. Day 2 started with a knock on my door. I live in a quiet neighborhood, mostly professionals who keep to themselves, so unannounced visitors stick out. I opened the door to find my father standing there, gray windbreaker, worn expression, and an old manila folder under his arm. "Can we talk?" he asked. I let him in. Not because I owed him anything, but because I wanted to see if the man who taught me how to fix a flat tire had enough humility to fix the mess he helped make. He sat at my kitchen table like it was a job interview. opening the folder and spreading out copies of bills, notes, and even some scribbled repayment plans. It might have looked impressive if I hadn't been the one who paid most of those exact bills in the first place. I didn't realize how much you'd been handling, he started. Your mother and I, we got used to thinking you'd always help. I nodded. You got used to taking me for granted. He flinched, but didn't deny it. Instead, he tapped one of the repayment plans with a tired finger. I want to pay you back. It won't be fast, but I'll start this month. I've got some retirement money I can tap into early. That surprised me. My father was many things, but self-sacrificing hadn't been one of them since maybe the early 2000s. I looked at the paper, then back at him. Why now? I asked. He hesitated. Because I saw the way Jenna looked at you. At the wedding. Like you didn't matter. Like you were just an afterthought. He looked down. That used to be my mistake. I don't want it to be hers. For the first time in a long while, I saw the man who used to carry me on his shoulders through crowded 4th of July parades. I nodded slowly. If you're serious, we'll start with the car insurance. You cover the rest of the year, then we'll talk. He looked relieved. Fair enough. After he left, I didn't cry. I didn't vent. I just sat in the stillness, processing what it meant to finally be heard, not just because I raised my voice, but because I stopped speaking entirely. Then came day 3. A handwritten letter. From Jenna. Slipped under my door, in my own mailbox, which meant she'd come by and chosen not to ring the bell. The envelope had my name in her familiar loopy script. I almost didn't open it. But curiosity, that old traitor, won out. It read, Nate, I've tried calling, texting. I know you're not ready to talk. I don't blame you. I've replayed that day 100 times in my head, trying to figure out what went wrong, and the truth is, it didn't happen on the wedding day. It happened long before. You were always there for me, rides, rent, bad dates, all of it. I always assumed you'd be there, and that was my biggest mistake. Not asking, not appreciating, just assuming. Tyler didn't know you paid the deposit. I never told him because I didn't want him to feel like we owed anyone. I wanted us to look like we had it together, like we'd earned it all. But that lie cost me your trust, and I see that now. I told myself you liked being behind the scenes. I told myself you were low maintenance. But I never once asked how you felt. I never once thought about what it meant to sit through that wedding knowing you paid for it, and were treated like furniture. You didn't deserve that. I don't expect forgiveness. I just wanted you to know that I see it now. Jenna, it wasn't dramatic. It wasn't groveling. But it felt real. And that made it harder. For a week, I didn't reply. Not out of spite, but because I needed to be sure this wasn't another one of those family panic moments where they say the right things just long enough for me to plug the holes again. I waited. I watched. Then I got an email. A digital receipt. $10,000 from Jenna, transferred directly to my bank. No message. Just the transaction. Then another, this time from Tyler. Subject, apology body. Nate, I just learned the full story. I'm sorry. That's all I can say for now. But we're starting our marriage by making things right. You deserved better. Hope to prove that moving forward. It wasn't perfect, but it was a start. I sent one final message in the group chat. No more payments. No more favors. If you want me in your life, you'll have to treat me like I matter. Not like a backup plan. This time, I mean it. I left the chat. I didn't block them again, but I left. 2 months later, my birthday came around. I didn't throw a party. Didn't send out reminders. I just made a reservation for one at a rooftop sushi place I'd always wanted to try and watch the city lights flicker below. Halfway through the meal, the waiter came over and placed a small box on the table. Inside was a note from someone who finally sees you. Happy birthday. It was from Jenna. I smiled, not because everything was fixed, but because, for once, I wasn't invisible. I wasn't background noise. I was seen. And I knew from now on, I wouldn't let myself fade into the scenery for anyone ever again. Not for family. Not for blood. Not even for love. I had learned painfully, fully, that being the dependable one doesn't mean you owe them your silence. It means you've earned your boundaries. And I finally had mine. I'm Jake, 25 years old, and if you'd asked me 2 months ago what I wanted for my birthday, I would have said peace and quiet. Not a party, not a cake, just maybe 8 hours of uninterrupted sleep, a hot shower, and maybe some kind of acknowledgement that I exist. But I didn't expect anything. Not from my family, at least. My life has been a long, slow lesson in managing expectations. When you grow up being compared to the golden child every single day, you learn to keep your head down and carry your own weight. My younger brother, Nathan, was always the chosen one, good at sports, loud, charming when he needed to be, and absolutely allergic to responsibility. I was the quiet one, the backup plan, the wallet with legs. So when my birthday landed on a Thursday this year, I didn't even flinch. I picked up an extra shift at the hospital, 13 hours, back to back, with just enough time to grab a cold sandwich from the vending machine between patients. I told myself it didn't matter, that I'd rather be helping people than sitting through another dinner where mom would stare at her phone and dad would talk about how proud he was that Nathan might get into community college if his grades didn't slip again. But the truth? I was exhausted. Every part of me ached. Not just from the work, but from the years of being treated like a walking credit card. When I finally pulled into the driveway around 1 a.m., the first thing I noticed was the emptiness. My car, my 2016 Civic that I paid off in full, was gone. At first, I thought maybe it had been towed. But then I saw a shiny, black Challenger parked in the driveway, still with the dealership tag on it. And standing in front of it, leaning against the hood like he was posing for a photo shoot, was Nathan. He was grinning, wide, smug, and completely unapologetic. Dad stepped out from the garage, twirling my keys on his finger like he'd just flipped a coin. "Happy birthday," he said casually. Then he tossed the keys toward me, not to me, but past me, like I was some dog expected to go fetch them. They landed on the gravel. "We sold your car. Nathan needs something decent to drive to class. Consider it your way of helping your brother get a head start." I didn't even blink. I just stood there, letting the weight of it settle in. Nathan, meanwhile, laughed and clapped me on the back. "Thanks, bro. I mean, it's not like you go anywhere anyway, right?" I don't remember walking inside. I don't even remember if I said a word. All I remember is sitting down on the edge of my bed, my childhood bed in the room I never really updated after high school, and realizing that every warning sign I'd ignored over the years had finally added up to this moment. I had let it get this far. I had made it easy. The next morning, as I was halfway through packing my things, quietly, methodically, like someone evacuating a fire before it gets to their room, Dad knocked on the door. Didn't wait for me to say anything. Just opened it and stood there with a piece of paper. $5, 200, he said flatly, like it was a reminder about trash day. "That's what your brother's tuition is going to cost this semester. You've got until Friday." I looked at the paper. It wasn't a request. It was a bill. And at the bottom, in his loopy handwriting, was a signature line for me. "You're the one with the job, Jake," he added, as if that explained everything. "It's not like we can count on Nathan to get a scholarship. You know that." I didn't argue. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't even sigh. I just nodded. And then I kept packing. There was no dramatic blow-up, no shouting match in the driveway. Just silence. The kind that speaks louder than anything. I zipped up my suitcase, unplugged my phone from the wall, and walked out past the living room where Mom was watching reruns and Nathan was asleep on the couch with the shoes still on. I walked out to the porch, looked back once, not for nostalgia, but to make sure I hadn't forgotten anything, and dropped one manila folder on the kitchen counter. I didn't leave a note. I didn't need to, because everything they needed to know was already inside that folder. And this morning, my phone practically caught fire. Missed calls from my uncle, 7 of them, back to back. A string of frantic texts from my cousin, all caps. "What did you do?" "They're freaking out. You need to pick up." And then a voicemail from Dad. His voice cracking. His words frantic. Something about needing to explain things to the police. Something about not knowing, and why would you even have that? I haven't listened to the whole thing yet, but I know what's coming. And honestly, they deserve every second of it. I sat in the quiet of my new apartment, a modest studio above a coffee shop on the edge of town, and watched the messages stack up on my phone like falling dominoes. The notifications were relentless. Facebook tags I was suddenly removed from. Family group chats imploding in real time. My cousin Kayla, the only halfway decent relative in the whole bloodline, had left a single voice message that I finally opened, mostly because it was only 6 seconds long and titled, "You win." I played it. Her voice was sharp, breathless. "You actually did it. They're losing their minds. Jake, what was in that folder?" I didn't respond. Not yet. Because right now, I want to take you back to why I had that folder in the first place. Because revenge like this doesn't happen overnight. It's not just a reaction. It's a decision. One you prepare for slowly, carefully, quietly. See, I work in medical billing. Not glamorous, not exciting, but very, very informative. And once you learn how to read paper trails, tax records, Cosigned loans, old account numbers, you start to realize just how exposed people leave themselves. Especially people like my father, who never once thought he'd be questioned, let alone challenged. It started a year ago. I had just finished paying off my student loans, and Dad called me, acting like we were buddies. Said he was proud of me and that it was time for me to start thinking like a provider. I was skeptical, of course, but he dangled a line I wasn't ready to ignore, that he wanted to help me buy property, something we never had growing up, and that he'd already found a house I could put a down payment on with him as cosigner. Except when I asked to see the documents, things got sketchy. First it was excuses. Then it was pressure. You trust me, right? Then it was, it's already in motion, Jake. Don't slow things down. So I pulled his credit. And that's when I learned the truth. He wasn't trying to co-sign a house for me. He had already used my information. Not just my name, but my social, my income verification, and my clean credit score. To lease a second car. For Nathan. That Challenger? It wasn't new. It was refinanced under my name 6 months earlier. And the reason I didn't get the notifications? Because Dad had updated the mailing address to his. So I started digging deeper. Opened an entirely new folder on my laptop, labeled it Plan B. And every time I found another account linked to me, another paper trail of fraud wrapped in family sentimentality, I saved it, printed it, dated it. Then I called the bank, froze the joint card, flagged the car, opened a fraud report with the credit bureaus quietly. No alerts to the house, no sudden freezes. I wanted to know just how deep the rot went. And oh, it was deep. Turns out, my father hadn't just been using my credit. He'd used my refund from last year's taxes, over $4,000, through a direct deposit switch he'd made when I still lived at home. I'd never noticed because I was working double shifts during COVID, barely checking my own statements. That money went straight to cover Nathan's second semester. And the utilities? In my name. Unpaid. Racking late fees. So I waited, quietly, for the perfect moment. And my birthday? That was the gift. Their gift to me. That was the green light. The folder I left on the counter? It wasn't a goodbye note. It was a bomb. Inside were copies of every fraudulent application tied to my name, bank statements with trace transfers between my father's account and mine, proof of forged signatures on 2 credit cards, and a typed letter addressed to 3 people: my uncle, a lawyer, my cousin, a law student, and the local police department's fraud unit. I had already emailed copies to each of them hours before I left. But the hard copy? The one I left on the kitchen counter? That was for Dad. That was for him to open, to read, to realize exactly how much he'd underestimated me. How the quiet son, the forgettable one, had been watching, documenting, waiting. And now? Now he was panicking. I scrolled through the texts one by one. From Uncle Tom, call me now. You need to explain this before I take legal action. From Cousin Matt, did you seriously send that report? Do you know what you've done? From Dad, son, this is all a huge misunderstanding. Please come home. We can fix this as a family. I laughed at that one, because the moment they sold my car without permission, they made it clear I wasn't part of the family. They made me the enemy. And now they were trying to negotiate with someone they thought was just a pawn. But I'm done playing games. And the real fun hasn't even started yet. I didn't answer anyone that day. Not my cousin, not my uncle, and definitely not my father. I silenced my phone, set it face down on the small kitchen counter of my new apartment, and sat in the window seat with a cup of coffee that tasted more like freedom than caffeine. For the first time in years, the silence wasn't suffocating, it was satisfying. But I knew it wouldn't last long. I had poked a sleeping beast, and I expected the beast to roar back. Sure enough, the next morning, the banging started. On my front door. 3 hard, angry knocks. Then again, and again. I didn't move. I just sipped my coffee and waited until I heard a voice I hadn't heard in years. Uncle Tom. His voice was deep, usually calm. But now, it cracked with frustration. Jake, open up. We need to talk. Right now. He didn't say, please. He didn't say, are you okay? He said, we need. Typical. Still thinking I was part of the system they controlled. Still thinking I owed them an audience. I let him knock a while longer before finally walking over and opening the door, not all the way, just enough to make it clear I wasn't welcoming him in. He looked older, angrier, holding the folder I had dropped off 2 days earlier like it had personally insulted him. Do you have any idea what you've done? He hissed. I met his eyes. Yeah, I said. I stopped being your scapegoat. Jake, listen, he started. tone shifting to the fake calm voice adults used when trying to pretend they weren't losing control. Your father made some bad decisions. I get that. But bringing in law enforcement? Dragging your cousin into this? That's not how family handles things. I almost laughed. Really? Because I seem to remember family handling things by stealing my car, rerouting my tax return, and sticking me with unpaid utility bills. That was a mistake, he said, waving the folder like it was an overblown parking ticket. They were trying to help your brother. That word, help. I leaned against the doorframe. If I'd done this to Nathan, would you be here trying to talk it out? Or would you already be on the phone with a prosecutor? He didn't answer. Exactly. There was a long silence. His jaw clenched. Your father's being investigated. You understand that, right? If this doesn't get resolved, he could lose everything. My expression didn't change. You mean like I almost lost my credit, my money, and my future? Yeah, I understand. He looked at me like I had just slapped him. Like the quiet, obedient nephew he used to know had grown teeth. You're seriously going to ruin your own family over a few $1,000s? I stared at him. No, I'm going to protect myself. Something no one else ever did. He opened his mouth, but I shut the door before he could say anything else. I locked it and walked back to my seat. For a moment, I just stood there, breathing, because it wasn't over. Not yet. That afternoon, I got a letter. Not a text. Not an email. A printed, hand-delivered letter from Nathan, dropped into my mailbox like some last-minute apology scrawled in guilt and desperation. It started with, "Hey, man," which already told me he wasn't serious. Then came the half-hearted paragraph about how things got out of hand and how he didn't know Dad had sold my car behind my back. He said he felt bad about the tuition thing and wished it had gone down differently. He even threw in a weird line about missing our gaming nights, which we hadn't had since we were teenagers. But the kicker? The final paragraph? He asked me to drop the charges because, and I quote, "Dad doesn't deserve jail." He was just trying to make sure I had a future too. That word again. Too. Like my future was always an afterthought. Like I had enough to spare, so why not hand it over? I didn't write back. Instead, I called the fraud investigator who had taken my initial report and asked for an update. She sounded surprised I called so soon. "It's moving faster than we expected," she said. "Your documentation was thorough, and the forged signatures match samples we've already compared. The bank's cooperating. There may be a warrant soon." A warrant. A few months ago, that word would have made me sick with fear. But now? Now it felt like justice with a clipboard. Still, I wasn't celebrating. Because I knew my father. He wasn't going to roll over and take the fall. He was going to fight, lie, manipulate, and drag down everyone he could to protect himself, including me. I wasn't afraid, but I was ready. Because I still had one last piece of evidence. One last thing I hadn't shared with anyone yet. And once that piece came out, this wouldn't just be a family squabble anymore. It would be a scandal. 3 days later, I woke up to a headline that made me sit up in bed, coffee forgotten on the nightstand, my heart thudding like a drum. Local contractor under investigation for financial fraud. Family member reportedly involved in exposing scheme. There was a picture of my father from a town hall ribbon cutting last year. Smiling, shaking hands, wearing that too tight blue blazer Mom said made him look like a real man of the people. I read the article 3 times, slower each time. The investigation had officially expanded. Turns out, using your own son's identity to finance cars, tuition, and tax theft is just the beginning when you've got a business that's been double billing clients for over a decade. I had suspected something shady when I found duplicate invoice templates buried in an old shared drive back when I worked for him one summer. But at the time, I chalked it up to disorganization. Sloppy accounting, not criminal intent. But now it made perfect sense. My father had been using me to cover tracks, not just because I was an easy mark, but because his own credit had finally worn thin. His empire, half illusion, half nepotism, was built on other people's resources. His clients, his employees, and now me. And I had become the loose thread that unraveled the whole suit. I turned off my phone. I knew the calls would come. Probably already had. Uncle Tom would be on damage control. Nathan would probably try the "I'm still your brother" line again. But none of it mattered anymore. Not after what happened that afternoon. Around 3 p.m., my phone buzzed once. Just one notification. An email. From the detective assigned to my case. Subject: Final evidence chain received. Thank you. I had waited until the last moment to send it. The last file. The one I knew would turn everything from "he said" she said, into absolute certainty. A video. From the door camera I'd installed on my old Civic. Yes, the same one Dad sold without my consent. I'd installed it years ago after someone broke into my car and stole my scrubs and ID badge. It auto-uploaded clips to cloud storage. And wouldn't you know it, 6 weeks before my birthday, there he was. My father, holding a clipboard, talking to a buyer in the driveway while waving his hand over my car like a game show host. This one's in perfect shape. One owner, my son, college grad, took good care of it. He won't mind. It's family. The buyer asked about the paperwork. My father? He pulled out a form with my forged signature. That clip was just 1 minute and 42 seconds long, but it was damning. And now it was evidence. The final nail. By the following week, the fallout had begun. 1. The police executed a search warrant at his office. Computers seized. Records taken. His assistant, Donna, the one who used to give me birthday cupcakes as a kid, was now named as a potential cooperating witness. 2. The bank closed 2 of his business accounts. 3. My cousin Matt, the law student, sent me an official apology letter. Typed. Signed. I didn't know, it read. I didn't believe you at first. I should have. I hope you can forgive me someday. I didn't respond. I wasn't angry with him. But forgiveness? That takes time. 4. My mother called. Not to apologize. Just to ask, how could you do this to your own father? I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I just said, he did this to himself. Then I hung up. And I blocked her number. Because here's the truth no one likes to admit. Family doesn't mean loyalty when loyalty costs your sanity. Family doesn't mean forgiveness when there's never been accountability. 2 weeks later, I was called into a formal meeting with the State Fraud Division. It wasn't a trial, not yet, but they needed an official statement. I brought every document I had, every dated email, every flagged transaction. The officer, a tall woman with a voice like sandpaper, listened to everything I said. When I finished, she looked me dead in the eye and asked, "Do you want to press full charges? This will likely go to court. Possibly jail time. He'll be on the record." I nodded. Once. Slowly. Yes. She didn't ask why. She didn't need to. The final outcome came 3 months later. My father was found guilty on multiple counts of fraud and identity theft. The business license was suspended pending civil litigation. He avoided jail time barely by agreeing to a plea deal, but the damage was done. He had to pay restitution to me and several former clients. The amount was public. $72,410. Most of it wasn't even mine. But the part that was? I donated half of it to a program that provides financial aid for students whose families steal or misuse their college funds. Because I know that pain. Intimately. Nathan? He moved out of town. Tried to start over somewhere quiet. Last I heard, he was working at a car rental kiosk. He sent me one last message 6 months after everything ended. "Guess you finally beat me at something. Hope it was worth it." I never replied. Not because I hate him, but because I'm done explaining myself to people who only ever saw me as a wallet with legs. As for me, I'm better. Not healed, but better. I bought a used car. Nothing flashy. Just something mine. I started therapy. I even reconnected with a few old friends, people who remembered me before my name was a bank account for someone else. I don't talk to my parents anymore, or my uncle, or most of that side of the family. And you know what? I've never breathed easier. Because sometimes the only way to fix a toxic legacy is to end it. Not with rage. Not with revenge for the sake of it. But with a quiet, undeniable boundary. No more. No more guilt. No more manipulation. No more giving from a well that was never filled back up. And as for the man who tried to steal my future, he'll spend the rest of his life explaining to people why he lost it all. Because he underestimated the quiet sun.